want to be today.
We have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a very bumpy night.
Yo, Adrian. You're gonna let me fight Apollo again, you know what I mean?
You dirty rat.
We shall never surrender.
Ah! Can we talk?
Frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn.
I get no respect.
Slip into the lives of some of the world's most fascinating people. Watch A&D's Biography and escape the ordinary.
I could have been somebody, Charlie.
From A&D, this is Biography.
And what is your name, please?
My name is Errol Flynn.
He's the perennial underdog with the frail physique.
Let me ask you, are you nervous? No. Good.
Who is beloved the world over as the high-strung Barney Fife.
Don is a very bright man.
When the old steel trap in here has made up its mind, there's no turning back.
And he is no more Barney Fife than I am. Don is basically a very quiet man.
He could play somebody who could be completely irrational. And it was so much fun to see him get in trouble.
He's a boxer. He knows karate. His hands are lethal weapons. So you don't want to mess with him. It's a side that Don doesn't want to talk about.
For somebody who's interested in being a comic actor, Don's pretty much up there on Mount Rushmore. And he's a wonderful lover.
But for Don Knotts, the laughter on camera masked a desperate need to escape a painful childhood and numerous personal tragedies in order to become one of Hollywood's most gifted comedians.
The drive, the ambition that he had to make it out of that small town to where he is today is incredible.
He never forgot that past that he came from. He's gentle, extremely modest. What's not to like?
West Virginia in the early 1920s was a bleak, economically depressed area, and for the residents of rural Morgantown, every day was an effort just to survive. Eloise and William Knotts had already been married nearly 25 years when the 40-year-old mother of 3 grown sons unexpectedly became pregnant. William, a struggling farmer and part-time coal miner, couldn't bear the weight of an extra mouth to feed and suffered a nervous breakdown shortly before the birth of Jesse Donald Knotts on July 21st, 1924.
My father was an unplanned baby, but I know my grandmother was thrilled. My grandfather had some mental problems, and he wasn't able to work on the farm anymore. And progressively, he became worse, and it got to the point where he was actually bedridden.
With her husband incapacitated, Eloise took control and moved her family off the farm into a low-rent house in the heart of Morgantown.
She was a very strong person. She was a survivor. She took in laundry, she took in boarders, she did anything she could to make ends meet, but she never lost her sense of humor. She was always there for them.
But Eloise could not protect little Donald from the terror inflicted by his father's deteriorating mental health.
My grandfather was a paranoid schizophrenic, but he would occasionally get out of bed and become quite frightening to people, terrorizing people. He would actually come after my dad with a knife a couple of times.
Don's 24-year-old brother Sid was frequently out carousing, so the frail youngster looked to his middle brother, 17-year-old Shadow, for comfort.
Shadow had a tremendous sense of humor, and he loved to play practical jokes. And I think Shadow was terribly important to Don because Don's father was ill and could not be a father. And I think Shadow sort of took his place.
To ease the tension at home, Donald's mother took him to the local movie theater, where he escaped into a world of fantasy. He also whiled away hours listening to his favorite radio stars, Jack Benny and ventriloquist Edgar Bergen.
He had written to somebody about getting a little gimmick that you put in your mouth that was supposed to make you a ventriloquist. And there was a little dummy in the store down the street, and he bought that for 50 cents.
Shy and lonely, the youngster spent much of his free time learning the tricks of ventriloquism. Despite the confidence he gained from his new hobby, Don remained anxious and grew painfully thin.
When he was young, because he was so skinny, everybody told him that he was sickly, and he heard that. And so he grew up believing that he was frail health.
But the adolescent's life dramatically changed when William Knotts suddenly died of pneumonia in 1937. And the pall that had hung over Donald for years slowly began to fade.
When my grandfather passed away, fear was gone. So he was able to be himself and to really come out, and his personality just exploded.
Before long, Don was dreaming about becoming a professional entertainer.
Don get up and give his little act in front of his mother, and she would laugh and nod her head with approval, and then he felt secure. And he needed that encouragement and that reassurance, and he got it from his mother. He really did.
By the time he entered Morgantown High School, the timid teen had developed a more self-assured and outgoing personality.
He got into high school and became the class clown, and he was like voted the most popular boy in school, and he had a lot of dates, and he just had a blast.
But Don's good times came to a crashing halt when, in 1942, his beloved brother Shadow lost his battle with chronic asthma.
He never expounded too much on sadness, but I could feel his hurt. He concealed it, but he suffered as a result of the loss of Shadow.
Throughout his senior year, Don found solace in his ability to make people laugh, and he was a standout in numerous school performances. Emboldened by his small-town success, the 18-year-old left home for the bright lights of Manhattan. But at his first audition, Knotts received a rude awakening.
He was told by a casting director, you know, you're not going to make it out here. I mean, he got a real put down. And at that point, he kind of tucked his tail between his legs and came back home. And he was already feeling totally humiliated because, well, he was the star of the high school, just the popular kid, and had made this grand farewell. I'm going off to the big city. Came back only maybe a few months later and had to get a job plucking chickens in the grocery store. That was a devastating experience.
By 1943, World War II was raging overseas. Don was unexpectedly given another chance at performing when he was drafted and assigned to Detachment X, an entertainment unit. For 2 years, Knotts toured the Pacific Islands as a ventriloquist, hamming it up for the troops in a morale-boosting show called Stars and Gripes. However, Don was frustrated that his dummy was getting the lion's share of the laughs.
People were laughing more at the dummy than they were at Don, and he just thought that the dummy was taking over his career. While he was on a ship, he threw the dummy overboard, and he said he could actually hear him yelling for help as the ship pulled away from this dummy.
When peace was declared in 1945, Knotts emerged full of self-confidence and hope for a bright future. He enrolled at the University of West Virginia and quickly became the big man on campus, acting in the drama department and enjoying a very busy social life. In his junior year, Don fell head over heels for a beautiful and vivacious sorority girl named Kay Metz.
I thought he was a good person. He was fun, and he was able to talk to me about feelings and things that most young men at that time did not discuss, and that just impressed me.
Don ardently pursued Kay, and the two married on December 27th, 1947. With his wife by his side, Knotts decided to tackle the world of show business once again.
He said, let's go to New York, and I said, great. We didn't have any money, no prospects, so he borrowed $100 from his brother, and so we went.
Kay quickly found a job as a file clerk, and Don wasted no time looking up an old Army buddy, singer Lanny Ross. who generously helped him get an agent at the prestigious William Morris Agency. Knotts could hardly believe his good fortune when he landed his first professional job in radio as old-time cowboy Windy Wales on the Bobby Benson Show.
Down in the Big Bend country roams a fearless golden palomino.
He can't be caught and he can't be broken.
Oh, Windy Wales could capture him.
You could, Windy? How?
Oh, well, sir, I'd dress myself up like a little pony and then coax him to me and then grab him.
Oh, Windman, how you make Palomino think you be pony?
Why, Harker, I'll just sleep out in the rain some night and catch a cold, and the next morning when I wake up, I'll be a little horse.
The radio show became a hit, and when the series was adapted for television, the 29-year-old enthusiastically agreed to reprise his role of Windy Wales. Eager to keep working, he also signed on as a regular in the soap opera Search for Tomorrow. In 1954, the hard-working performer added fatherhood to his resume when his daughter Karen was born on April 2nd. By now, Knotts was juggling 3 jobs and a growing family. Exhausted by the heavy workload, he dropped out of the Bobby Benson TV show. But within months, fate dealt Don a stunning blow. His radio show was canceled, and his character on Search for Tomorrow was written out.
There was a little span there when he didn't have anything, and that was our worst time because we had just had our daughter Karen, and we had just bought a little home in New Jersey. And of course, we were scared.
For months, the unemployed father pounded the pavement looking for work. Finally, he heard about an upcoming Broadway comedy entitled No Time for Sergeants, a humorous look at Army life starring newcomer Andy Griffith. The show was filled with Southern characters, and Don knew he would be perfect in any role. He literally begged the producers to see him and was rewarded with 2 minor parts.
The first day of rehearsal, I recognized something, and I said, "Excuse me, ain't you Windy Wales?" And we became friends that minute.
The production became a smash hit, and when in 1958 Andy Griffith headed for Hollywood to star in the film version of the play, he lined up the small role of Corporal Brown for his new friend's movie debut. After filming, 34-year-old Knotts returned to New York, where he plunged into the thriving Manhattan club scene. The funny man soon caught the eye of television star Steve Allen, who quickly signed him to a 3-year contract as writer and performer for The Steve Allen Show.
I was looking for new funny people to work with, and Don wrote his own stuff. In one of the routines, he was a last-second replacement for a weatherman on a television newscast. It was Don at his greatest.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to your 11:10 weather forecast. As it's brought to you every evening at 11:10 at this same time. The present temperature is degrees.
The talented cast, which included Louis Nye and Tom Poston, invented all sorts of wacky characters, but it was a character Don created himself, the nervous man, that caught the audience's attention.
Here's our next man, more or less, on the street. What is your name, sir?
My name is C.H. Morrison, and I'm from New York, and I'm a trapeze artist. Retired.
The thing that made it so funny, no matter what he said, you could see what was going on inside of him. That's where I first saw him on TV, was the man on the street. When he was like this, and they said, "Are you nervous?" No, you know, he'd go like that. And then I thought that was very funny.
Let me ask you, are you nervous? No. Good.
In 1959, when the Steve Allen Show moved to Hollywood, Knotts uprooted his family, which now included a son, Tom, and moved them to Los Angeles. However, only months later, unkind fate stepped in again. The Steve Allen Show was canceled, and 36-year-old Don Knotts was once more unemployed and hustling for work. In 1959, Don Knotts brought his unique brand of humor to the big screen in 20th Century Fox's Wake Me When It's Over.
All right, now let's see. We have the nature hike. I've got 9 men listed.
Yeah. You'll be in charge. Now, point out the main species. You know, the variegated crane, the speckled scissorbill.
What's a speckled scissorbill?
It's a bird. You were supposed to read up on birds.
Oh, come on, Sarge. The fellas don't want to go around looking at no birds. It's crazy.
There's nothing crazy about it. Some of the biggest lawyers and judges in Boston go out and watch birds. Now, hurry up! We've got flora and fauna scheduled for next week.
Although the film was a modest success, work was intermittent. But one night, while watching a television pilot for a new series, Knotts recognized his old friend Andy Griffith playing a small-town sheriff and reached for the phone.
When Don saw my pilot, he called me and said, "Don't you need a deputy?" And I said, "Lord, call Sheldon Leonard."
Executive producer Sheldon Leonard saw potential in Don's quirky, deadpan style and created the character of Deputy Barney Fife just for him. And on October 3rd, 1960, The Andy Griffith Show debuted on CBS.
The Andy Griffith Show, starring Andy Griffith, with Ronnie Howard, also starring Don Knotts.
Originally, I was supposed to be the funny one, telling little funny stories about people in town and stuff. And by the second episode, I realized Don should be funny and I should play straight for him.
Don was amazing to watch, doing one of those classic Barney Fife sort of moments where he's bragging and going completely over the top and then gets the rug pulled out from under him. You know, I mean, he was just, you know, really ingenious.
I reckon I can get you started on the right track, Oak. Generally speaking, there are two main requirements in becoming an adept with a common slingshot. Fortunately, as a youth, I was endowed with both good eyes and strong pinching fingers. Then after a while, when the ordinary shooting got dull, I started taking up the trick stuff. You know, like over the mountain, behind the barn, under the bridge. And of course, my best was a tail gunner, you know, with a mirror.
No fooling. You can shoot it backwards?
Oh, there, I'll show you. Huh?
Barney, I don't think the office is the place to shoot that thing.
Please, Andy, I can do this with my eyes shut.
Barney, don't shoot the slingshot in the office.
Andy, I was born with a slingshot in my hands. Oh, that's good. That's good.
The chemistry between Griffith and Knotts was undeniable.
Finished with the wastebasket.
And Don shined as the cocky but inept deputy.
He was always puffed up as Barney Fife, but yet he was rather pathetic in a lot of ways, too. So I think that your heart goes out to someone like that, who thinks more of himself than he really is.
We did a show called Barney and the Choir, where Barney joined the choir and couldn't sing. So then I talked him into telling him the microphone was so sensitive that he just didn't hardly have to make any noise at all.
Balmy and life breathe. Balmy and life. Balmy.
That's it. That's it. That's it. You got it.
And we put a contrabass behind the curtain. And Barney thought that voice was coming out of him.
Much like co-star Griffith, Knotts was a natural storyteller, and the two were soon actively involved in the writing of the program.
The handful of times when the producer, Aaron Rubin, would come to the set and he'd say, "We're short." And then you'd see Andy say, "Short?" Oh. Well, where's Don? And Andy and Don would sort of play back and forth off each other and create these moments that really are classic team comedy.
This is just about the biggest thing I ever bought.
It's a major step.
The last big buy I made was my mom's and dad's anniversary present.
What'd you get them?
Septic tank.
For the anniversary?
Yeah. Oh, they're really hard to buy for.
Besides, it was something they could use. They were really thrilled. 2 tons of concrete, all steel reinforced.
You're a fine son, Mark.
Try.
Don loved every minute he spent with the cast and crew, who had become like a second family to him.
Every once in a while, he'd say, you know, get your glove, Ronnie. And we'd play a little catch, and it was a lot of fun.
It was like getting up to go home. I'm not making it up. Everyone got along, everyone. Everyone respected everyone else.
At the age of 36, Don Knotts was firmly established as one of television's most recognizable and beloved faces.
How extraordinary for him to have been absolutely exploding in the entertainment world and to continue to just carry himself with this grace, this dignity, this humbleness that was genuine.
But Don's growing celebrity was putting a strain on his 13-year marriage. Though shy and unassuming by nature, the actor had learned to be outgoing and sociable in public. His wife, Kay, however, found it more difficult to adjust to life in Hollywood.
I think that Kay was essentially a small-town West Virginia girl that wasn't ready for that type of exposure to the limelight.
Hollywood and fame is difficult on a relationship. It's hard for the person to always cope with what you have, you know. You're very well known. You can't go anywhere without being recognized. Fame is not a comfortable thing to live with.
The winner in Hollywood is Don Knotts.
In 1961, Don's fame increased when he won an Emmy Award in the category of Best Supporting Actor.
Oh boy. I don't know what to say. All my life I've been a prepared loser. I do want to say a very sincere thanks to the Academy and to the members of the entire Griffith Company, and particularly to a very, very wonderful man, Andy Griffith himself. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
With his success on The Andy Griffith Show, Don became a sought-after character actor in such films as It's a Mad, 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 Mad World and Move Over Darling, starring Doris Day and James Garner. In 1963, as Knotts entered the 4th season of The Andy Griffith Show, he tried his best to balance a busy career with his home life.
I always knew that my father loved me. Sunday afternoons was the family time because he worked really hard on the show. Usually where we went was Griffith Park. We'd rent bikes and ride together. That was one of our favorite places to go.
Don also remained close to his mother, for whom he purchased a house in Morgantown.
He was always very, very close to her. And when she would come, the two of them would sit and talk for hours and just, you know, rehash things, and they watched baseball. They were great fans.
Knotts had traveled far from his humble past, but as his fame grew, it became increasingly difficult for him to cope with the pressure to stay on top.
Whenever he would get anxieties, he would transfer that into a physical ailment, and it was just in his head. When he was doing the Andy Griffith Show, he would be holed up in his room all weekend long with some illness, a sore throat or an earache or an infection or whatever. But then when Monday rolled around and it was time to go back to the set, he was well again.
Don's erratic behavior was beginning to take its toll on the entire family, but it was particularly hard on his wife, Kay.
It was very difficult for my mother. He was always sick or had, you know, some problem, and she had to take care of him constantly, so it was difficult for her.
We decided to separate for a while, but we did not intend it to be a permanent situation, but it just evolved that way.
After 17 years of marriage, Don and Kay decided to divorce. Though the split was amicable, Knotts was saddened by the breakup of his family. Despite the upheaval in his personal life, Don's career continued to flourish. In 1964, Knotts landed his first starring role in The Incredible Mr. Limpet, an innovative movie which combined live action and animation. Playing a man who loves fish so much, he becomes one. The film was a hit with children across America, and Universal Studios offered Don a 5-year contract. The talented actor was at a crossroads. In order to fulfill his dream of becoming a star on the big screen, he would have to walk away from the Andy Griffith Show.
His last show, after 5 years, we used to have a little drink with the crew at the end of each Wednesday. And we were having that, and Don and I were sitting there talking. And we talked a long time about this and that and the other, you know. And we looked up at some point, and the whole stage was empty. They all left without making a sound. They knew how close Don and I were.
Don took a huge gamble and left his friend and the show behind, risking it all on a future in films. By 1965, Don Knotts had conquered television and was well on his way to becoming a movie star. But the 41-year-old actor was still loyal to his friends on the Andy Griffith Show and frequently returned in guest spots. His occasional appearances were well received by audiences and critics alike.
He won 5 Emmys on our show. He got 2 of those Emmys for guest appearances. He's the only one. Our show never won an Emmy. It got a nomination once.
Andy would tease Don about the fact that he, either hadn't been nominated or hadn't won himself, or if somebody bugged him enough, he might go into a little Barney, yeah, picked up another one, but no, far too modest to bring it up himself.
I think that the fact that he was the closest possible friend to Andy Griffith was something that had to be on his mind all the time, that why don't people recognize what this man is doing? I couldn't be me without him.
Knotts realized that he and Griffith were a winning team, and he sought Andy's help as he made the transition into motion pictures.
We had done a haunted house episode on the Griffith Show. And so he said, wouldn't you think that would make a good movie for me? I said, yes, it'd be wonderful. He said, well, would you come over with us and help us write a story? And I did.
The comedy was called The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, in which Don played Luther Heggs, a nervous, slightly dim-witted typesetter for the local newspaper.
The genius of Don, that he does use his own body and facial expressions and everything as a character. And he comes equipped with this very, very funny guy.
Isn't it true, Heggs, that you were offered a full-time job as a reporter if you brought back a sensational story from that house?
No, that's not true. I saw those things.
Yes.
I heard those things.
He heard those things.
I saw the bloodstains on the keys, and they're still there.
The Ghost and Mr. Chicken was a hit with families across America, and Don was soon seen in a string of highly profitable, wholesome comedies.
Look at me, I'm an astronaut. Reluctant astronaut.
See Don ride the rocket sled at 1,100 miles an hour.
Don Knotts, a Western hero? It's no mirage, or is it?
He's a humdinger, a Western swinger, but he has a little trouble with his trigger finger. When he takes aim, it's anybody's guess. He's the shakiest gun in the West.
Riding high on his success as a film star, Don was also enjoying his new bachelor status.
Don liked girls. I'll say that for him. He liked girls a lot.
He's a smooth talker. How could you not sit down and have a drink with Don Knotts, you know what I mean? And he's quite the ladies' man. He really is. He's one hell of a dancer, I'll tell you, boy. Sometimes even with a partner, he's good.
But by 1968, America was in turmoil. Vietnam defined a generation, and the sexual revolution was in full swing. Adult-themed films such as Midnight Cowboy and Easy Rider were changing the face of Hollywood, and Knotts feared that his clean-cut persona was becoming outdated.
This country was making huge changes. People, they had all kinds of other problems, and going to see family films was not something they wanted to do.
On with the show!
In 1969, in an effort to update his image, Don Knotts starred in The Love God, playing a meek publisher who unwittingly becomes the editor of a girly magazine and quickly learns to enjoy his new lifestyle.
Hi, folks. Want to hear something funny? I'm cursed with an abnormal sexual magnetism for women.
While women go wild for their love god and acclaim his prowess,
You possess a fantastic sexual magnetism.
our love god proclaims his innocence.
Well, I'm just a clean, decent... Oh, hello, Miss Kesey.
You seem to be everywhere, doing everything.
Well, it's not easy, Rosella.
The Love God was the only thing that tried to do something to change his image and, quote, keep up with the times. It was the wrong thing to do. The public was not ready for Don Knotts playing Hugh Hefner.
The Love God was a box office disaster, and when his next movie, How to Frame a Fig, fared no better, Universal Studios opted not to renew Don's contract. On the heels of this professional disappointment, Knotts was devastated to learn that his beloved 86-year-old mother was seriously ill. Distraught, he rushed home to be by her side just days before she passed away.
He really loved his mother very dearly, and I think that was quite traumatic when she passed away. He came to visit me for about 3 or 4 days, consoling him.
Don was profoundly saddened by his mother's death, and with his movie career at a standstill, he took stock of his life. Returning to television in 1970, Don took a bold step and decided to host his own variety program simply titled The Don Knotts Show. But the shy and private character actor found it difficult to face the audience as himself.
He always felt he was an actor who played comedy, but you have to give me a character to play. And I kept saying, you know who the character is on the show? It's a guy named Don Knotts. But it didn't work.
After only 1 season, Don asked to be let out of his contract. The talented comedian was suddenly unemployed, and with no one by his side, the future for Don Knotts was no laughing matter. In 1971, the resilient Don Knotts breathed new life into his career by returning to the theater, where he starred in a wildly successful tour of Neil Simon's hit comedy, The Last of the Red Hot Lovers. That same year, the 47-year-old actor met Laurel E. Chuckna, a gregarious 24-year-old from the Midwest.
I met Don on a blind date. I expected to see some variant of Barney Fife, maybe. In comes this very well-dressed, charming, modest, gentle, really down-to-earth person. And he sits down, and he was kind of a charmer, kind of a ladies' man. And I was smitten.
She was very bright, very personable and cheerful. She liked the glamour and the parties, and I think that was good for him because he tends to be a little bit reclusive sometimes.
The couple soon began to spend all of their free time together, and Laura Lee did her best to deal with Don's continuing anxieties about his health.
He's just so dear. You just want to hold him in your arms and protect him. He had that vulnerability. I think he had a lot of anxiety that he carried from childhood. I believe that it channeled itself into concerns about his health. It also, of course, created the humor that he escaped into.
After dating for 3 years, the pair married on October 12, 1974.
We got married in Maui, and at the wedding reception, somebody kicked him in the leg. Well, he had had a blood clot years ago and was really concerned, so we didn't go on our honeymoon. We came back to LA, and my parents went on our honeymoon. You don't go into any marriage blindly. You pull together as a team.
Throughout the 70s, the prolific actor juggled work in the theater with numerous television appearances. And in 1975, Knotts teamed up on the big screen with longtime friend Tim Conway in Walt Disney Pictures' The Apple Dumpling Gang. In the comedy western, Don and Tim play idiotic bandits who are too inept to steal a cachet of gold from 3 young orphans.
All I would want to do is just stand next to Don, and you're part of the funny business because you know he's going to be funny. One of the things that neither one of us did was try to detract from what the other was doing.
Oh, I'd say it'd weigh close to, let's see, gold is $15 an ounce. How many ounces in a pound? Ow!
Why didn't you tell me my rear end was on fire? Well, you don't have to do anything to attract attention. Okay. Got a match?
I got...
Excuse me.
The success of the Apple Dumpling Gang soon led to a string of films pairing Knotts and Conway.
I eventually wrote 2 movies in which Don and I starred, The Private Eyes and The Prize Fighter. And it was such a pleasure just to be with him on a daily basis, let alone to work with him in film.
Name's Ralph Furley, bachelor at large.
In 1979, Don received an offer he couldn't refuse, to step in as the new landlord on the hit television show Three's Company, starring John Ritter, Joyce DeWitt, and Suzanne Summers as co-ed roommates. Knotts easily fit into the show's farcical, over-the-top style as lovable loser Ralph Furley.
Ralph Furley, or RF, thinks he's a ladies' man, and he thinks he's very cool and sophisticated. Of course, he strikes out more times than not.
Hi, my name's Ralph Furley. You girls are gonna have to get to know me sooner or later, so what's wrong with... What's wrong right now? Okay, guess what I am?
I don't have to guess. I know what you are.
We're gonna be seeing a lot of each other, so you can consider all your little worries over. Just think how safe you're gonna feel when you go to bed at night, knowing I'll be sleeping right underneath you.
The unlikely Lothario instantly became one of the most popular characters on the program, and an improbable fashion icon.
Don would come in wearing these flowered print knit vests, you know, that a mother wouldn't give its son, you know, and scarves around here and these orange things, and we would fall down laughing in front of the audience because we hadn't seen these costume changes. He'd open the door.
We meet again.
He'd look like a Howard Johnson's motel, you know.
But while TV audiences were tuning in each week to watch the slapstick antics of Ralph Furley, Don Knotts was facing a real-life drama. In the early 1980s, he was diagnosed with macular degeneration, an eye affliction which slowly robs its victims of their central vision. Don was worried he wouldn't be able to continue working, but the cast came together and helped the actor cope with the symptoms of his disease.
They could not have been nicer to him. They knew he had trouble with his eyesight and reading. They worked around it. It was terrific, absolutely terrific.
Still, Knotts was convinced his eyesight was deteriorating at a rapid rate and fell into a deep depression.
He had a really bad time for a while, and he sort of hit that wall and just decided he was going to take the challenge, and he was amazing.
With Laura Lee's support, Don chose to face his fears head-on and underwent risky eye surgery. The procedure was a success, halting the progression of the ailment and leaving the actor with most of his vision intact.
He's completely adjusted. He has trouble reading and he can't get a driver's license, but other than that, his life hasn't changed much as a result of it.
Don stayed with Three's Company for 5 successful seasons, and by the time it went off the air in 1984, he had been in the public eye for nearly 4 decades. But the 60-year-old veteran still had a few tricks up his sleeve and would soon win the hearts of an entirely new generation. By 1984, Don Knotts had re-established himself as one of television's premier comic talents. But off-screen, the actor's chronic concerns about his health required constant attention, straining his 10-year marriage to the limit.
We were together a lot. Sometimes we were together 24 hours a day. I just think with that kind of interdependent and intimacy in your life, very strong patterns develop of how you behave with each other. And I think there were just a pattern or two that really needed adjustment. So we decided to separate.
Don was distressed that another long-term relationship had ended, and in 1986, he was happy for the opportunity to reunite with his old friend Andy Griffith for the highly rated TV movie Return to Mayberry.
We were both older, you know. We had to accept that. But things fell together just like they always had.
The two actors relished working together again, and when Andy asked Don to play a recurring role on his television series Matlock, Knotts readily agreed.
Andy has really done a lot for my father. He's been kind of a mentor to him in a way. He's always gone to bat for him. They've been a great team and a great friendship over the years.
Don's personal life also picked up when he met a young actress, Francie Yarborough, who was hired to help him read scripts. Despite their age difference, the two soon became a couple.
She's a very positive, upbeat person, and I think she's a great influence on him. And they get along really well.
With Francie by his side, Knotts began touring the country in such plays as You Can't Take It With You and on Golden Pond.
Golden Pond was so wonderful for Don because it was such a departure from Barney Fife. He did it for 10 weeks. There was never an empty seat, the greatest reviews, and had a great time.
TV repair.
TV repair?
Yeah, TV busted.
Yeah?
Well, here I am.
At an age when most people are looking to retire, 74-year-old Don Knotts jumped into a key role on the big screen in the innovative film Pleasantville. The movie revolved around a brother and sister played by Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon, who are zapped into a 1950s black and white TV show by a cantankerous television repairman played by Knotts.
You think this is a toy? You think it's your own little goddamn coloring book? Where's the remote control I gave you?
Why?
Because you're coming home, you little twerp, and I'm gonna put this place back the way it was.
I can't let you do that.
Just give me the damn remote!
Loved him in Pleasantville. I thought he was great. That's a completely new character for him. It was great to see him, you know, sort of like as this perverse, you know, doorman to the inner workings of the Twilight Zone. I thought it was just great.
Pleasantville was a critical and box office hit, and the sudden focus on Don inspired the unpretentious comedian to pen his autobiography, Barney Fife and Other Characters I Have Known. And at book signings, fans turned out in droves to see the star in person.
Ladies and gentlemen, our most favorite son, the famous and great Don Knotts.
The following year, Knotts was honored when Morgantown named a street after their most famous citizen. But Don's reputation spread far beyond the streets of West Virginia. By 1999, the Andy Griffith Show had been on the air continuously since its debut almost 40 years earlier, and a host of merchandise had flooded the markets, making Don Knotts a pop culture icon.
He downplays everything. He's so modest. He's so humble. I just want to say, wake up, you're a legend. Don't you know this? But he's just a down-home person, and I think this is why people love him.
And while the irrepressible Barney Fife has endeared himself to fans around the world, it is the gentle and sensitive Don Knotts who lives in the hearts of those who know him best.
I just had so much fun doing improvisations with him, you know. There's nobody like Don Knotts who can fill a comedic moment.
Don's character is just the gentle side of comedy. He's unusual. He's left a wonderful character to this industry that will never be duplicated.
I admire him a lot. I've always been very proud of him. And when I was growing up, he was my hero.
Don is my best friend, and I am enormously fond of Don. I always will be. There's nothing he could do that would ever change that.
Take care now.
For the web's best bios, log on to biography.com.